It's okay. Do I need it? It's a bit crackly. Is my voice loud enough like this? Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Shlomo, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, especially to the Babylon Cultural Association. Thank you very much for having me. And Naramson, thank you for organising this today. I'm here today to do a presentation about the creation of the Assyrian Parliament, which is basically an Assyrian government body. If I may start with why it's needed, our current situation as Assyrians. As many of you know, many of our people have left the homeland. Some estimates are that as much as 90% have left the homeland. And they're either in transit to or living in the diaspora, which is, Australia, USA, Europe, and these countries. There's a big problem with this here. Although, as human beings, we're safe in these countries, we've got good lives, our kids are secure, their future's secure, but our identity, our ethnicity is at a great danger here. Within the next few generations, we're going to see a large number of our people disappear to assimilation. We're going to assimilate into these countries. Whether we like it or not, it's happening. You could probably see it around you now. Our children, they're speaking English to each other. We're adopting the Australian culture, which, don't get me wrong, I love Australia. It's a beautiful country, but at the same time, I belong to a nation or an ethnicity that has been around for thousands of years, and now it's looking like it's in grave danger. We've even been listed in the United Nations or our language as a critically endangered language, which means it's under threat of disappearing very soon. So something has to be done within this generation or the next generation, possibly the generation after, if there's still enough left, to secure us for the future, to secure this nation of ours, so it doesn't disappear. It's been around for thousands of years, and for it to, in our lifetimes, we have to do something. It's our obligation. So that's our current situation now, which has led us to wanting to do something. We do have political parties, we do have organizations. Unfortunately, we don't have clear leadership as a nation. I mean, we've got churches, and the churches have leadership, but as a nation, we don't have any sort of structure, any sort of organization or leadership that can make decisions or that can start making movements towards securing either a homeland, rights for our people, strong cultural centers in the countries we live in. That's lacking at the moment. So this is the challenge we're facing now as a people. So why create a parliament? As I stated, one thing we're lacking is leadership. And the only way that we can come together as a nation is to create a government structure where we can create leadership. Now, there's all different forms of government. We've got democracy, you've got monarchy, you've got dictatorships, you've got theocracies. What we're proposing is democracy. And what democracy basically means is the power is in the hands of the people, of the Assyrian people, you people. You have the power to vote and elect who you find as the most, the best person who represents our nation according to you. So we all cast our vote together, and the one with the most votes obviously wins the election. And they've got a limited term of 4 years, so no one's got kind of power that, it turns into a democracy, a dictatorship or anything like that. The power always stays with the people. So the representatives are always going to be the voice of the people and not a voice of their own will. They'll be the will of the people. So that's why we're proposing a democratically elected parliament. So it's probably the most feasible and the most viable way to bring our nation together. And democracy is something every country in the world, or nearly every country in the world, uses today. It's the most respected form of government. As we see, whenever there's dictators, the powers to be don't like that, and they want to, break the dictatorship and introduce democracy to those nations. As a people, we all live in Australia. We love the country. We can complain about the government, but at the end of the day, the government is, it is a good government. That's why the country is so good, so fair, and that's why we've got great lives. And it's because it is a democratic government. And that's what we want to introduce to our nation. But what we're trying to do is create it all and make it possible. But at the end of the day, it's up to you, the people, to accept it, whether you want democracy for our nation or not, to be successful. If the nation doesn't want democracy, doesn't matter how much work we put into it, it won't be successful. And it's up to you, whether you participate so we can have a leadership, or whether you don't agree with democracy, whether you like dictatorships or whatever it is. That's your personal opinion. We'll just make it possible for you as a democracy. So, as I stated, our current representatives, we've got churches, we've got political organisations, we've got federations, we've got various movements, we've got lobbyists, and they're all working according to their ideology. And unfortunately, all their ideologies don't line up. They kind of contradict each other sometimes as well. Some are working for Assyrian interests, some are working for Trinane interests, some are working for Iraqi interests, some are working for Kurdish interests, and all sorts of things. And they're going out to the world and lobbying and trying to represent our nation with their ideologies. And unfortunately, it's just mixing up the message of who we are and what we want as a people. And this is one of the main reasons why we need proper leadership, so that we have one voice, not 1,000 voices. And that one voice will be elected by the people, so that one voice will have the credibility to speak on our behalf. So, as you can see, this is a demographics chart of our people that are scattered around the world now. We've got approximately 1 million Assyrians around the world. Now, this is people actually refer to themselves as Assyrians. We've got some people in the grey area, they don't know what they are, and then we've got some that call themselves Arameans, some that call themselves Chaldeans, and all different things. So this is just people who call themselves Assyrian. We've got approximately 1 million. Now, the way we came up with this information is we use census data from the various countries. We use church memberships. For example, in Australia, I contacted all the churches, or our group did, we contacted all the churches that we've got Assyrians in, got their membership numbers, used the statistics from census to determine various numbers. It's impossible to come up with a firm figure because we're so scattered, but this is an approximate, that we've got about 1 million Assyrians today in the world. As you can see, in America, we've got about approximately 260,000, which is probably one of the largest populations. Eurasia, which is 2,000 there. In Europe's 370,000. Middle East, 238,000. Oceania, which is Australia, 65,000 approximately. Now, just to give you an idea of what we're trying to achieve, or what we perceive that the Parliament will try to achieve, is one of the first steps would be to try and obtain a status of being a stateless nation. So what is a stateless nation? You've got state nations, so that's a nation that has land, and then you've got stateless nations, which is a nation who no longer has its land. Now, our problem is we're seen as an ethnic minority or a religious minority of Iraq or Syria or Iran or Turkey or these countries. So I've experienced this myself when we've been lobbying. We've been to Canberra. We've stated our situation, what our people are going through, and they've said to us, you know what, we've given 100 million to Iraq for the minorities. Go to them. Go see them. Part of that 100 million is for you guys. But the thing is, we're not Iraqis, we're not Syrian, we're not Iranian, we're not Kurdish, we're Assyrian. ethnically, we're Assyrian. We're genetically different from all those other races in that region. Our language is different, our culture is different, our religion is different. We don't want to be swept under the carpet with all these other nations. We want our own identity. We want our homeland back. I hope that's what everybody wants as well. So at the moment, we don't have a homeland. Our homeland is being occupied by Kurds. It's part of it is under Iraq. So we want the status of stateless nation at the moment, so that funding doesn't go to Iraq or Kurds for them to give to us. We want the funding to come directly to us. But the problem is we don't have a government structure yet who can accept these funds. We don't have a treasury yet for our nation to accept these funds. So they can't give us anything just yet. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't. We got to organise this. We can't wait for other people to come and make this for us. See, at the moment, we're a nation of hope. You know, we hope somebody's going to come and help us. We hope some country's going to be our knight in shining armour and come along and say, here's your country, Syrians, here's your government, here's your army, here's everything. I don't like to believe in hope, because hope is a beggar. Hope is somebody sits there with their hand out waiting for handouts to come. I believe in faith. And I don't just mean religious faith. I mean faith in ourselves. We can do it. We're a people who's very resilient. I mean, just the fact that we're still alive today as a nation just states that we are a special people and we can do great things. But we've got to have faith in ourselves. We've got to get organised as a nation. We've got to become structured as a nation so that we can start to make some meaningful progress. So once we get that status of stateless nation, there are many benefits for us there, many benefits, whether they be financial, whether they be in terms of rights, in certain recognitions. I don't really want to go into that. That's more kind of a legal thing which I don't want to discuss in this presentation, but there are many benefits for us there as a nation. So how's this structure going to work of the parliament? Right now we're spread out, as I showed before, across the globe. And each country where there's Assyrians has its own needs. So our needs here in Australia are different from the ones in, for example, in America. And the ones in America are different from the Assyrians that live in Armenia. And the ones in Armenia are different from the ones in Europe, and etc. So the way that we propose to have this government is, for every 10,000 Assyrians living in an area, there'll be one representative. So, for example, if Australia's got, say, 65,000 Assyrians living in it, they'll have 7 representatives. So I'll be rounded up. And United States, for example, they got 260,000, they'll have 26 representatives. And in total, we'll have approximately between 96 and 100 representatives who will come together and meet, whether it be once a month or whatever it is, that's yet to be sorted out, as the parliament from across the globe. And each one will attend to their region's needs. Now, each country will also have departments. For example, in Australia, we've got a Department of Agriculture, Department of Housing, Department of Water, etc. But our needs are different from Australia's. We don't need a Department of Water. What we do need is, for example, a Department of Refugees, a Department of Culture, Department of Education, Department of Language, Economy, Security, etc. So each department will look after those specific needs of the nation, well, of our people, sorry, living within a particular region. The first parliament will actually be a constitutional parliament. So when it comes time to elections and we elect our representatives, the first elected representatives will come together and they will write the constitution, which will become the Assyrian constitution. Once the constitution is ready, we don't know how long that will take. They'll have to agree on certain points. Again, everything gets decided by majority, by vote majority. Once the constitution has been organised and written, Then we have another election to have actual representative. And every 4 years, we'll have an election and there'll be 2 votes. One will be for the regional representative and one for the Prime Minister or the head representative. The Council for the Assyrian Parliament, which is the group I'm with, we don't have a political opinion. So we're not, for example, we don't lean towards Zoa, or we don't lean towards AUA, we don't lean towards any party. We don't have an opinion. Our job is just to create this structure, create the rules of the elections, create the how it's going to function, create the procedures, make it all function. Basically, we'll put up all the websites, put up all the registration forms, do all the verification, and take it all the way up to the elections. So once the elections are done and finished, we disband our group, and all the power will be handed to the newly elected parliament, and they'll organise the future elections and etc. So our job is just to create the basic structure for now for this to be possible. That's what we're working on. And the way we've structured ourselves is we've got a legal work group, we've got a public relations work group, we've got the election work group. So each one works in their field. So for example, the election work group works on the election procedures, the rules, how the elections are going to be run, etc. There's an advocacy work group who goes out and meets with all the political parties to get them on board. So far it's been very promising. All the political parties have agreed that this is a good thing and they support it so far. I don't know how they'll support it in the future once it actually comes to fruition. Some might be threatened by it, but who knows. So far they all support it. Fundraising work group. So far we've funded this whole project ourselves. That's the members of this group. There's approximately 50. And we've got a human resources work group and an academic and experts advice. So we've got an advisory board who gives us advice on how to approach certain things and how to do them, etc. So we basically got an open door policy. It's open to all Assyrians. And when I say Assyrians, Assyrian is an ethnicity. It's not a religion. It transcends religion. So you can be Assyrian and be from the Syriac Orthodox Church or from the Syrian Church of the East. You can be from the Chaldean Church. You can be atheist. You can be Buddhist. You can be whatever, because Assyrian is an ethnicity. So when we say an open door policy, it's open to anyone who wants to join, as long as they recognize themselves as ethnically Assyrian. And I think that's one of the most important things when we're trying to sort through this problem of tri-name and things like that. One of the main features of an ethnicity is self-identification. So it's not only your DNA, but it's also how you identify yourself. If you identify yourself as Assyrian, you're welcome. But if you don't, there's no way I can force you to become Assyrian and force you into this thing. It's best if you're left out because the ideologies don't line up, and they could harm our nation and our nationalistic goals. So these are some of the members of the Council for the Assyrian Parliament. These are the people who are working on putting this whole thing together, and they come from all across the globe. So I'll just leave that up for a minute for you to look at them. There's others that aren't there. They asked to kind of work on the download. They didn't want to be publicised that they're working on the government, whether it be because of their employment, whether it be because of the country they live in. They might feel threatened. We haven't included them here. But we've got approximately 50 members who are working on this, creating this parliament. So far we've got probably, I'd say 80% of the structure organised, the rules, the procedures of how it's going to work. It's about 80% there. A lot of it is still in draft format. Once it's all complete, we plan to have a conference with all the political parties and organisations to get feedback from them and get their authorisation for us to work on it officially as the official group who's trying to create the Assyrian government. So if we get endorsement from the political parties, then it kind of gives us the credibility to say, you know, we've been endorsed to create this government structure. So the election rules, how can you vote? Well, what are the rules here? So you must be of Assyrian origin, so you must be ethnically Assyrian, or we were saying at least 25% Assyrian, so you must have one grandparent that's Assyrian. You must be minimum 18 years of age. You must fill out a registration form, so you have to register first before you can vote. We've got a registration table just back there. There's Danny and Sargon. At the end of this, it would be great if you can register so you'll be able to vote, eligible to vote. You can only vote for your region. So for example, if you register to vote, you can only vote for candidates that are from Australia. You can't vote for candidates that are in, for example, America or anything like that. You'd be verified by, we've got a team of volunteers and members who do the verification. So you must be, we have to verify that one, you're Assyrian, and number two, that you're one person registering once. Now it's difficult to do that because it's not going to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. I mean, the United States, when they had their elections, they had people that were in the graveyard voting. They had one woman who said she threw 300 votes. So we can't expect ours to be perfect. The way you can actually register to vote is either online. We've got an online registration form, or as I said, in person. We've got a registration desk there. Now, candidates who will actually be running for a position in the parliament. The candidates must be of Assyrian origin as well, obviously. They must be minimum 25 years of age. They must fill in a form and submit it to us. We have to do a bit of a background check on them just to make sure that they're upstanding people of the community, not criminals or anything like that. They can only run for their region. So for example, an Australian representative can only run for Australia, not for the United States or for another region. They cannot have a government position with another nation. So if there's an individual who's employed by the Australian government, they cannot also be in the parliament because it's a conflict of interest. And that goes for all the countries around the world. And they cannot be a member of CAP. So they cannot be a member of our group. By member, I mean they're not involved in the verification or registration process. They can be in an advisory role, but they can't have anything to do with the registration or election process. So at this stage, as I said, we're probably about 80% of the way through the documentation. We've actually started registering people. We haven't started registering candidates yet. We're just registering people to vote now. So we've got an online form. If you look at the little pamphlet we've given you on the back, there's the website there. And it's in all various languages. It's in English, Russian, Arabic, Farsi, obviously Assyrian. It's in Swedish, German, and I think there's a couple of other languages that have been added recently to it. Now, in terms of filling in the registration form, it's very simple. There's only a few questions. For example, we need your email address, your name, your age, the city you live in, the state and the country. We ask for things like your parents' names just to verify that you are one person, and you know there could be several people with the same name, but usually the parents' names will be different. So it's just a way to differentiate you. We've put it down to a bare minimum of questions because we know people don't like to give out private information. But we feel what we've asked is the minimum that's necessary to be able to verify individuals as being of Assyrian ethnicity and also as registering once to vote. So how in-person registration works, we're going to have desks set up at churches, at Assyrian venues, clubs, etc. Every so often, where the people who don't have access to internet can come in and register, fill out the paperwork. We'll have people who actually fill it out for them. You can be verified on the spot as well, which is a bonus, but if you do it online, we'll have to contact you and ask a few questions as part of the verification process. The verification process is going to be a very lengthy process. We do have a fair few volunteers, but we've got a big community here, so it will take some time. So the voting process, when it comes time to the actual elections, we're not going to hold the elections just so that there's no conflict of interest. We're going to approach a third-party company to do it. We've spoken to 3 companies so far who run online elections, and they've given us quotes that vary from about 15,000 up to 50,000 to hold the elections for us. We haven't committed to anyone just yet. We're just in the process of going through their security wear and things like that, and just determine which one's the best one for what we're trying to achieve. Again, it'll be online. Once you've been verified, you'll be issued with a PIN code or a login code. You log on to the website, you put in that login code, which will then give you access to cast your vote. You'll have a list of the candidates, and the candidates also will have to basically do some campaigning. We need to know exactly what they're about, what they're trying to achieve, who they are, what their history is, what their education is. We obviously want the best from our communities to come forward, and would ideally like individuals from each community. I mean, we've got the Syriac Orthodox community, we've got the Syrian Church of the East community, we've got communities in Sydney, we've got communities in Melbourne, we've got the Chaldean Church community, so that everyone is represented and everyone's needs are met to the best of their abilities. So after the elections, results will be verified by an independent election monitoring organisation, as I just stated. It won't be through us. They'll do the vote counting and they'll release the statistics or the results of the election. Successful candidates will be announced by us, the council. Members will be invited by CAP to attend the first session where they will start the work. We will transfer all the data and the funds that we've collected to the Parliament so that they can start work. They'll start working, the first Parliament will start working on drafting a constitution and their internal procedures and rules. The rules that we'll set will be very basic, that's our group. It's just so that they can get up and running. Obviously, just like the Australian government, they're always introducing new laws, new rules, etc. They'll have to start introducing new rules to govern themselves as they go along. The Parliament will hold a referendum for the Constitution when it's approved by the Parliament. Parliament will work with organisations and political parties to protect the rights of Assyrians around the world, especially in the homeland. One of the main things is, as I said, working with the United Nations and securing funding from the countries we reside in. For example, Australia's got a lot of grants. There's a lot of grants out there, but no one is claiming them. There's so many grants out there that have been left unclaimed, and they're grants to help refugees, they're grants for education, they're grants for community events, but no one's really looking into it. It's an untapped source of funding for our communities. So we're looking to utilise funding from the nations we live in, besides the United Nations. So as a closing, I'd just like to say it's vital, it's very important that the result of the Parliament and what we're trying to achieve all ends up or results in us having a homeland. Without a homeland, without a country, without Assyria, we will not survive. We need our land with our own government, with our own army, with our own police force, with our own education system, for our people to feel safe and secure on their land, so that they don't not only not run away from there, but so that our people can go back, the people from the diaspora community. It's not that we don't love the land that we've left, that homeland. We didn't like the politics of the land. We didn't like the government on that land. So that's what we need to change, is the government on the land. We need to install our own government there for our people to feel safe and be able to return. As I said, we're in a situation where we're actually facing extinction within the next few generations if something doesn't happen. And what a shame it'll be for this culture who's given so much to the world. It's such a rich and beautiful culture, for it to just wither away. And it's happening so slowly that we don't realize it. That's the sad thing. And who's going to be held accountable? Not the Kurds, not the Arabs, us. We're letting it happen. So we need to do something to secure ourselves, our future, and the future of this nation, so that our children are given this blessing too. It really is a blessing to be Assyrian. I mean, I'd love for my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to have this blessing too. But it won't happen unless something is done to secure this ethnicity of ours, or this identity of ours. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. I really appreciate your time. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. I'll be taking questions now. Yes.
Thank you. Will the candidate we vote for, would he represent the Assyrians in Australia as a whole?
Yes, not as a whole. So Australia will have 7 candidates. So he'll be one of 7. So like I was saying, ideally it'll be best if there was a candidate from each of the different communities, because obviously our communities don't intermingle too much. We've all got our own kind of little communities spread across Australia, or across Sydney, should I say. So hopefully there'll be a candidate from the Syriac Orthodox Church community, one from the Syrian Church of the East community, one from the Chaldean Church community. They're all Assyrian, but the thing is, they all belong to different communities, and the communities have different needs. Yes?
What about the people who doesn't call themselves Assyrians? Will these people left out for good?
Well, I don't want to say for good, but this is the thing. Like I said, to be ethnically Assyrian, in my opinion, there's 2 things. One is obviously you need Assyrian genetics. You need to be genetically Assyrian, or your DNA has to be Assyrian. Number 2 is it's the self-identification. You need to know yourself as Assyrian. If you don't, for example, there's probably fighters in ISIS who have Assyrian DNA in them because of the genocide of a few hundred years ago, where he might have had Assyrian parents or whatever, and he was converted to Islam and whatever, and today he's probably killing Assyrians. He's got Assyrian DNA, but does that make him Assyrian? So if somebody does not recognize themselves as Assyrian, it'll be dangerous for us to include them with us. So we should just focus on ourselves. It's like 3 brothers going down a raging river and there's a waterfall at the end. Rather than try and help them in the river, let's get ourselves out of the river and then try and help our brothers out.
Theoretically, I found it very nice at the beginning of your explanation. You said we need statute, a stateless nation.
Yeah.
This statute, where we get it from the United Nations?
It's a recognition by the United Nations, yes.
They got in their charter law a stateless nation to accept others as a stateless nation?
I can't go through the mechanics of how it's going to work, but I know there is a procedure that we need to follow, and it's not easy to get that recognition. But as we are today, we can't get that recognition. We need to have official representation, we need to have proper leadership and a proper voice to go after that. It's our job just to create the parliament and how they move forward with it, the elected representatives, that's their prerogative. But to be honest with you, I can't tell you how they'll do it, how they'll approach it. We're just going to create that structure or that vehicle for them to be able to go for it. Yes, Darby.
This Parliament House, where will it be created? And who will pay for those who attend the MPs who attend in that Parliament?
Okay. In the beginning, well, it's going to be online mostly. They're going to hold all their meetings and everything. We do it now. I mean, we got members from all across the world. We meet once every 2 weeks, or so. We meet online. It works great. And I'd assume in the beginning they'll probably do it that way. They might in the future want to meet in particular locations around the world, or maybe once every 3 months to meet around the world all in one place, face to face. Funding, eventually we will ask the Assyrian nation, once the parliament is established, to pay a voluntary tax. Just like we pay tax to Australia so that Australia can function, we'll ask our nation to pay a voluntary tax. We can't impose it, but a voluntary one. You want to give $1, $5, $10, whatever you want to give, you can. We'll also be going for funding from, as I said, the United Nations, from Australia's got grants and things like that. We'll be trying to utilise funding from other nations as well.
You were mentioning that most, like some of the other parties or organisations are kind of on board with the idea of it.
Yep.
Have you had opposition? Have you had people that are saying like it's a bad idea, trying to sabotage?
Not from parties. We have had individuals on Facebook who probably I'd say they don't understand the concept, who've said, oh, you know, this is bad and we shouldn't do it. But
Keyboard warriors, they just...
Yeah, but from organisations, we haven't had any organisations said, no, this is bad and we're not going to support it. So far.
Okay, in the first instance, when you recognise yourself as Assyrian, and your ethnicity is Assyrian, and you guys do a bit of a background search, yep, you're in, and you can vote.
Yep.
And like you said, there's some people who by DNA they are Assyrian, but today they could be fighting for ISIS, they could
Yep.
call themselves Aramean, they could be called themselves Chaldean.
Yep.
What happens if they do come back and say, I am Assyrian now? Even though if you do a background check the last 20, 30 years of his life, he is ISIS or he is Muslim or he is something else.
Yep.
Hellfire?
Well, if they recognise themselves as Assyrian, that's great. Yes, they're included. They're Assyrian. But
Their faith is different.
you mean the ideology is different?
The faith.
How do you verify that actually are Assyrian? Because if they've lived with Muslims for 100, 200 years,
Yeah.
but they've got DNA Assyrian, how would you verify?
We need references. One of the verification processes is reference checks. So we need people to verify that they are Assyrian. So they need to either speak Western Assyrian or Eastern Assyrian or something and say, yes, we've known them for many years and they are Assyrian. As I said, it's not going to be perfect. And we probably will have non-Assyrians registering to vote. There's nothing we can do to stop that. But does that mean we don't move forward? Does that mean we stop and we don't create a government because maybe a few individuals who we find unsavoury getting in to vote? The candidates will be much more strict on. The candidates especially, because there's not going to be that many. We'll be doing background checks on them. We have to make sure that they are upstanding citizens of our nation. So if somebody who's not Assyrian registers, they'll have to be voting for a candidate who has been scrutinised very well. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your presence. It means a lot to me. Thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.